what philosophy is. Philosophy begins with questioning, and humans are curious by nature. This curiosity makes them ask questions. Some people get involved to the extent of becoming full-fledged philosophers, while others choose to restrain themselves from becoming so. A child at the age of about 2 or so also seems to begin with questioning and never stops asking why, even if the adults get tired of answering. Each child then is an authentic philosopher. And this reminds me of a famous book called Sophie's World, in which the author, Justine Garder, in a beautiful manner compares philosopher's curiosity with the curiosity of a child. And in the same tenor, he compares the common man with the father of the child. Just as a child is ever amazed and enchanted to see the world and asks endless, continuous questions to her father, similarly, a philosopher seeks to know each and every detail and remains engaged in the process of knowing. The father, on his part, gets irritated while answering those innocent questions and ultimately snubs her. Likewise, the ordinary people call a philosopher childish and laugh at him for seeking answers for irrelevant questions. Socrates was famous for asking provoking and endless questions to poets, politicians, and others in positions of authority. In the end, they were so annoyed with him that they put him to trial, and he was condemned to die by drinking hemlock. Let us return to the curiosity of the child. A child may begin with the question, "What color is the sky?" The parent answers, "Blue." The child asks, "What color is grass?" The parent responds, "Green." To ask such a question, the child already has a concept of colors, though she may not be able to distinguish colors properly. When the parent answers, the child begins to distinguish colors and says the sky is blue and the ocean is blue. Now she asks, "They are both blue but not the same color. Why are they both called blue?" Now the child has reached the stage of distinguishing between different shades of a color like blue. Now the child asks a more difficult question. Why is the sky blue? The parent takes some time. She may respond that it is due to certain intensity of light which is measured in angstroms. But the child is smart. She says, "You have told me what blue is, but you have not told me why it is blue." This means the child has some sense that everything has a cause. Where did this idea come from? Now, if the parent believes in God, she says, "Because God made it blue." But if she does not believe in God, she says, "Because it has evolved in nature to be blue." The child is not satisfied with either answer. The questions of what, inquiring about the essence of something, and the questions of why, inquiring about the causes of something, are deeply philosophical questions, and we can say they are all scientific questions. Coming back to the answer that blue is the intensity of light measured in angstroms, the child may respond, "I can see that it is blue, but I cannot see the intensity of light measured in angstroms." The parent now responds, "Reality and causes are sometimes transcendent. They are beyond our perception. And yet, we infer that they are the causes." We can now make the transition to the big philosophical questions such as what is the nature of ultimate reality? One answer in Indian philosophy by Vedantins is that it is Brahman. But what is Brahman? It is transcendental, beyond our world of perception. The Charvakas, like the child, ask, "If I cannot perceive it, then how can I have knowledge of the Brahman? How can you say that it is transcendental? Why should I believe you that Brahman is the ultimate reality? The Vedantin now responds, we live in a world of many beings and many minds, each seeing and perceiving similarly and differently. The world that is transient and the knowledge that is attained in this world through perception and experience is also transient. Whereas the Brahman is the transcendental, in it everything is one. It is beyond perception and it is permanent, not transient. Hence, the knowledge within Brahman is absolute knowledge, not transient knowledge. The perspective of everything being one in the Brahman is often called monism. The Charvaka now responds, I think all knowledge comes from experience, from perception. How can you jump by reasoning to the existence of anything without any evidence? How is the knowledge of the Brahman attained? The Vedantin responds that it is revealed knowledge, revealed to the sages who are superhuman, and the sages then are able to transmit it to us through their powers. The Charvaka now responds, who is a sage? Why should I accept anyone as a sage? How do you distinguish an authentic sage from a pretender? How can the revealed knowledge received by any sage be verified? Why should I believe any sage? I simply do not accept any source of knowledge besides perception. Now the Vedantin and the Charvaka will now carry on the debate, each building more and more sophisticated arguments for their claims. As we can see, we have moved from a child's questions to a high-order philosophical debate on the nature of ultimate reality. Now, who wins the debate is not so important, but the activity of debate is central to philosophy. If any philosophical claim is immune to debate, then it is not really philosophical. Debates proceed through rigorous arguments. So, arguments are also essential to the activity of philosophy. Now, to close my introduction to what is philosophy, let me summarize a few points. Point 1. Philosophy begins with questions, with curiosity and the desire to know. Point number 2. In answering and understanding answers, we move to definitions of concepts. Point number 3. We also move to understanding distinctions, which distinctions to make and which not to make. And there is never one answer to any philosophical question. Hence, we have debates about how a question like what is the ultimate reality is to be answered. Debates then are the lifeline of philosophy. In a good debate, each side does not simply state a claim and stomp their feet and say that their claim is correct. Rather, they build rigorous and intricate arguments to support their claims. Hence, arguments are essential for the activity of philosophy. Now, philosophy can also be defined in terms of the different branches of philosophy. Historically, there have been 4 branches of philosophy. There is metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and logic. Now, metaphysics deals with questions of what the world is made up of, what is real and what is illusion, what is permanent and what is transient, whether there is a final cause like God or there is not. The initial question may be, does the world exist? Some nihilists argue that nothing exists. Now, only in philosophy can such perspectives be entertained. And this is the greatest virtue of philosophy, as no perspective is preempted or censored by authority, making philosophy the most open-minded and open-ended of all disciplines. Interestingly, a nihilist cannot be refuted, but there is no reason to accept a view just because it cannot be refuted. If we answer the question, does the world exist or does anything exist, in the affirmative, then we move to questions like, what is the nature of the world? Further to questions like, is there a final cause of everything? And so on. Now let us come to the second branch of philosophy, which is epistemology. And epistemology begins with the question, is knowledge possible? Again, some philosophers called the ultimate skeptics, who are called the ultimate skeptics, believe that knowledge is not possible. Again, within philosophy, we allow this as a perspective. Imagine if in a particular science like biology, there is a biologist who says that no knowledge in biology is possible. There would not be much point in her studying biology then. But this is not the case with philosophy. Why? Because whereas in each discipline we are restricted to a particular domain of knowledge, in philosophy we go to a second level. What is knowledge? This question itself is a subject matter of philosophy, and particularly an essential question for epistemology. In seeking knowledge of biology, physics, or chemistry, the question of what is knowledge is not entertained, nor is an ultimate skeptic tolerated. We can have more moderate philosophical skepticism, which claims that anything you propose as knowledge, I can raise legitimate doubts about whether it is knowledge. The Charvaka's objections to the sage's knowledge discussed above are this type of skepticism. If we agree that knowledge is possible, then we move to the questions of the nature of knowledge, the definition of knowledge, and the distinction among different sources of knowledge. As we will see, all Indian schools of philosophy accept perception as a source of knowledge, but there are long debates lasting centuries on the other purported sources of knowledge, such as memory, inference, comparison, and verbal testimony. Now let us come to the third branch of philosophy, which is called ethics. Ethics deals with questions of our actions. Is any action right or wrong? Again, since philosophy is broad-minded, we allow in ethics a perspective which begins with answering this question by no. This perspective is called moral relativism, in which what is right or what is wrong is relative to either culture or individual or simply to an emotional state. If we accept the answer yes, then our task is more difficult, as a series of questions now ensue. What is right action in any given situation? How do we justify our action as being right? I will be presenting in later lectures the ethics of the Bhagavad Gita, which addresses these questions in a detailed manner. But let one thing be clear. Ethics is not about what is decided as right or wrong by someone outside me, but it is about what I am to do in a particular difficult situation, perhaps facing a moral dilemma, as Arjuna does. If ethics was a mere following of commandments, then the whole Bhagavad Gita would be a useless text. Ethics involves a self-discovery, self-knowledge, and self-realization. It is only when Arjuna goes through these stages that he comes to a point at the end where he can finally resolve his moral dilemma and do the right thing of joining the battle. The fourth branch of philosophy is called logic. Now, logic is the basic methodology of constructing and criticizing arguments and building better and more logically sound arguments. As such, it is not a branch of philosophy, but historically, logic has been studied by philosophers, so we might as well consider it a branch of philosophy. Now, arguments are inferences from premises that are accepted to be true to conclusions, which hence must also be true if the arguments are valid. So, the basic activity of logic is to determine whether any constructed argument is valid or invalid.